Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the Trader API streaming service, how to set things up, and we're going to be requesting data for futures to make sure things are working as intended. If you've been following along, I went over this API and have been building a script that serves sort of like a package. The script on the screen shows all the functions pertaining to this API, along with saving some important variables such as your app key, your secret, and along with access to your tokens that you refresh every week. The script is available on my Patreon, and I'll leave a link down in the description area. But in order to get the streaming service to work, you just need access to your tokens, and we're going to go ahead and add one more function which gives us the streaming information, and that will be saved under cs_get user preference, and there's no parameters. So if we open up this function, we're going to set this as our URL. We're going to check our access token to get our most up-to-date bearer token, and we're going to submit a get request using that URL and our current access token. And I have some status checks, so if we were able to get information back from the API, it'll give us a status code of 200. We're going to extract that information, which essentially is just our accounts, the streamer info, and offers. So we're going to end up using this function in another script where we keep all of our functions pertaining to the streamer only. So we're going to set up our working directory, load up all the functions, and here's where we're going to use that new function. So if we go ahead and run this, I'll show you what the streamer info contains. And if we click on streamer info, here you'll see a list of all of your accounts that you have access to, along with the streamer information, which we're going to be using in this script. So that's all we really need from this function, as we're just going to be extracting information. And the first two blocks that we have are to log in and log out. So these are just going to build some JSON blocks where we have to submit a random number for the request ID. The service would be admin, the command will be to log in, and we're going to pull the information for the client customer ID and the Coral ID from our streamer info. We're also going to need to pass in our access token, the client channel, and the client function ID. So this is going to build the appropriate JSON block to log in. Similarly, to log out, the command is just changed to log out, and we don't need to submit any parameters. So we're just going to need the customer ID and the Coral ID, again pulling from the streamer info. Now we need to set up two functions. In order for us to request data, we need to pass in some symbols along with the command. So it'll be subs if you want to request data, unsubs to stop getting data, add if you want to add a new symbol to the current streaming service, and according to the documentation, view will set all the parameters or changes to the current streamer. So if we open up this function, we're going to do a check and see if the user entered one symbol or multiple. Since if we're running multiple, we need to separate these using a comma. Now here's where we set our JSON block, where we pass in a random number for the request ID. The service will be chart futures. The command gets passed in. The customer ID and Coral ID is pulling from the streamer info. The keys are your symbols. And for the fields, we're going to default to all 7. So if we check in the documentation, here for chart futures, if we scroll down to the fields, these are all the available fields, and we're just going to default to all of them. So back in the script here, once we build the JSON block, we're just going to return it so that we can send it to the streaming service. Now the next function is to retrieve and compile all the data. So there's no parameters here. What we're going to end up doing is saving all of our messages we get from the streamer into a folder called futures dump, which would be in your working directory. So it's going to create a folder, and we're just going to put all the messages in there. And within the function, we're going to list all the files within that folder, and we're going to check for any data. So we're going to read all of the files in. If there's no data, it'll default to null, but if there is, we need to extract the content and format the column names. So we're just going to replace the names that they used to their appropriate ones. So we're going to get the time, the open, high, low, close, and volume. We're going to format the time, and we're going to return all of the data as a data frame. Once you have that set up, you can create a new script which will contain all the instructions and connections for the streamer. We're going to load up the script I just went over. We're going to create a futures dump folder in our working directory if it doesn't exist. Now we need to set our URL, which can be found in streamer info, so that gets passed in. So we're going to start off by connecting, and we need to specify what happens every time we get a message. So on message, we're just going to save that event into our futures dump folder so that we can retrieve it later. And on open, we're going to send our JSON login block, and on close, we're going to send our JSON logout block. Now we need to build our appropriate JSON blocks to request the data. So as you see here, I want the JSON blocks to request data for ES futures and the NASDAQ mini, and the command will be subs. So we're going to check the ready state and make sure that the status is 1, which means it's connected. We're going to print that out. After it's connected, we're going to send our JSON block that we just built in line 35. Now I'm going to run everything up to line 48, and we're going to go ahead and check our folder. So in your working directory, you should see this folder called futures dump, and we see that we're getting messages from the streamer. So we're going to go ahead and set this folder aside. Now say you wanted to add a symbol after the fact. So again, you would just use our function function called stream chart futures, which builds the JSON block for your request. So here my request will be to add the gold futures contract, and we're going to send that to the streamer service. So let's go ahead and run lines 52 and 53. So I'm going to pause here for a few minutes so that we can get more data from the streamer before compiling the data. Alright, so in line 58, we're going to compile all of our messages and return the data frame to see what we were able to get. So if we run that line and check all data, we see all of our three symbols. So we have the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, and our gold futures contract as well. So we can sort this by key, and we see that we have the sequence, the symbol, the time, the open, high, low, close, and volume. Now the good thing about the function is that it'll remove unnecessary messages. So we see that our folder is cleaned up quite a bit. It's going to skip all the messages that don't have any data to hopefully speed up the process. Now if you just want to isolate to a particular key, you can run line 60, which will only have S&P 500 data. So if we click on sub data, we only have S&P 500 data, and we can go ahead and convert that into an XDS object and plot it. So if we run this block and we take a look at the plot here, now you can see your minute bars. Now to close or shut down the streamer, you will run lines 70 to 73. And after running that, you're not going to get any more messages from the streamer, and you have successfully logged off. But with that, guys, this concludes the video. Hopefully you were able to get some data, and I started off with the futures so you could run this after hours as well. In the upcoming weeks, I'll go over the other services that they provide, such as level 1 data and using the streamer for options. So stay tuned for that. I'll leave a link down in the description area to my Patreon where you can find these scripts. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.